I'm Josh George, filming a college football video.
It's going to be about the Big 12. We finally have a schedule that I think is reliable. I'm going to go bottom to top here, starting with the Kansas Jayhawks. Look, they do have Puka Williams, who is one of the top three running backs in the Big 12. Although last year they did finish 124th in the nation in rushing. They do have Les Miles, who I think will be a Hall of Fame coach. But the fact that they didn't schedule a bonus game shows me that they're not as ready for football as some of the other Big 12 is. So for the Jayhawks, I have them 0-9. Now to the West Virginia Mountaineers. Neil Brown is starting his second season as head coach. He's 40-23 overall as a head coach, which is a pretty good record. The problem is he has a new quarterback and an offense that has 7 starters coming back, but was 119th in total offense last season. Not very good for an offensive league. I think their offense is what holds the Mountaineers back this season. So for the Mountaineers, I have them 4-6. And some key games that I think they might could win that they'll end up losing is maybe when they host Kansas State. I think that could be a big game. And I think hosting Baylor could be a big win for them. Now to Kansas State, Chris Klieman, he's been a really good coach for this team. They beat Oklahoma last year. They looked good against Kansas. They finished 76th in rush defense, which is not very good. And they have 0 starters coming back on their offensive line. So Skylar Thompson, returning quarterback for that team, is going to be running for his life. And I don't know. I think we'll really see how that line develops. I have them losing to Texas, and in their last game of the season, making them 4-6. Now to the Baylor Bears. Under Matt Rule, they beat every team in the Big 12 that wasn't named Oklahoma. But with Coach Andre, who's a defensive-minded guy, and only 2 defensive starters returning on this team, I think that's not a good look for Baylor. I think they're in trouble. And as you can see, some tough road games, including a trip to Norman, which will be OU's senior night, and a trip to Austin to face Texas. That's just not a good look for them. I have Baylor at 4-5 this year. Now to Texas Tech. I think they're a really topsy-turvy team. Now, we all know that Alan Bowman, their quarterback, suffered a collapsed lung 2 seasons ago and could opt out this season, deciding not to play. That could really factor in here. But they've got the talent to beat the top teams in the league. They took Baylor to overtime, losing 30-33 last year. So with Tech, when it came down to it, middle of the road, 5-5. Now for Iowa State. They're a team that before that Notre Dame debacle had either won or had every game within 14 points in the last 3 years under Coach Campbell. And he's got Brock Purdy coming back. But I don't think that they get over the hump this year. I'm just not buying in to Iowa State this year. I have them at 6-4. The biggest loss is probably at TCU. That's why I have TCU, the Horned Frogs, ahead of them in conference play. Now, TCU, Gary Patterson's entering his 20th season at TCU. He's had back-to-back seasons of 6+ losses. Of course, in 2015 he had 11 wins. In 2017 he had 11 wins. So we know Gary Patterson's quite capable, but he only has 9 starters returning total this year, which is why I have them beating Oklahoma State the last game of the season to give for their big senior night and going 6-4. Now for the Longhorns of Texas, the Texas Longhorns. Tom Herman, one of those coaches with a lot of pressure. 7 starters on offense, 7 starters on defense, but their entire right side of their offensive line is going to be different, including Tyler Patterson, who's a freshman offensive line projected starter. I think that could pay dividends later in their season. They also have a new defensive coordinator, Chris Ash. I think that could affect their season as well. I have them 7-2. That doesn't include the Oklahoma game. I think that's the game that their season really hinges on. I think that's the game that will decide if they get to play for a Big 12 title. But with Chris Ash being new and him getting his first look at Lincoln Riley, I think that could be bad. And Oklahoma has 5 starters returning back on their offensive line, and Texas missing 2. It usually comes down to the running game. I've got them losing to the Sooners and a 7-3 season for the Longhorns. Now, Oklahoma State. They did something that I really respect. They kept their hardest game against Tulsa. I've got them 7-3, but I think a lot of their wins are gonna be the fact that they have 10 starters back on defense and their 3 main contributors on offense, including Sanders, Wallace, and Hubbard. So that's the way I have their season finishing. The reason I don't have them beating Oklahoma is, frankly, it's just not it's not a game that they usually win. They're 18-89 against the Sooners overall. Now to the Oklahoma Sooners. Their schedule got shifted around. It really benefited them, I think. Now they play Iowa State before Texas, not after. I think that's huge. They play Texas a little earlier, and they don't have to face 2 teams in the non-conference, which the last time they played them, they were double overtime games, Army and Tennessee. So for the Sooners, I have them 10-0 and taking a trip to the Big 12 Conference Championship to face Oklahoma State. The top 2 teams go through. OU's defense wins championships. They were 119th in pass defense 2 years ago. Last year they were 58th under Alex Grinch. They moved up to 38th in total defense. I think the defense improves again with 8 starters coming back. 8 starters on an offense that will be led by Spencer Rattler. He's a big-time quarterback. Everyone's got a lot of respect in him. I know the 3-headed monster is going to give him a challenge, but I have OSU 7-4 after the loss, and I have OU at 11-0 as Big 12 champs.